So hopefully my internet won't screw up. It was taking forever to load, so hopefully it'll work. I said I would go live for a little bit and talk about how I make sour cream and my recipe for the bread maker we just got. It's super cool. So for the sour cream, literally all you have to do, you make sure it's organic milk, but get milk from the store, raw milk, organic milk, and get sour cream from the store, cultured organic sour cream. Take a half a cup of that, of the sour cream, and add it to 2 cups of milk and stir it together really good with a whisk or a fork. Put it in a mason jar, put a lid on it, and let it set on the counter for a couple days or until it gets thick, and you have soured cream. It's like magic. But when you put the lid on it, make sure that you leave it kind of loose at the top so air can get out, but it can't get in because you don't want it to like get fizzy or weird from the cap being too tight on it. And for the bread maker, I wrote down my recipe here. I use 1 cup of lukewarm water, 1/3 a cup of lukewarm milk, 3 tablespoons of butter, 1.5 teaspoons of salt, and 1.5 teaspoons of active dry yeast. And I bought yeast specifically for bread makers because that's what we got. But that'll yield 2 pounds. So if you have a 2-pound bread maker, you can do that. You're just going to throw like all your wet ingredients in the bottom, then add your flour on top and make kind of like a little hole in the top of the flour and put your yeast in there so that it doesn't get in contact with the wet ingredients before it starts kneading. I thought that was the coolest thing with the bread machine because like you just dump everything in there and then like a few hours later you have like the most beautiful loaf of bread you've ever seen. But if you don't have a bread maker, you can still use that recipe. You'll just have to do all the kneading yourself. So for that one, you'd probably need 2 or 3 maybe bread pans, and just work all your ingredients together until it's a nice consistency. You're going to want to mix them all together until it looks like dough. Then knead it for like 5 or 10 minutes. Let it rise for about an hour. Knead it again and then let it rise for another hour and then bake it. It usually takes like, I don't know, maybe like 30 to 45 minutes to bake it in the smaller pans. In the bread maker, it takes like an hour because it's like a whole 2-pound loaf of bread. What else do I want to talk about? God, this is a really cute book. I got it for Christmas from my stepmom, and it's just like a little bound notebook. I've been like writing recipes and stuff in it. My baby's crying in the kitchen. I have a great roommate who's gonna hold him while I do this video. Oh yeah, fermented veggies too. I was gonna talk about that a little bit. I really like sauerkraut. I haven't made any in a while, but it's super easy. You get like 1 or 2 heads of cabbage, get a big, like a 1-gallon mason jar. I have one with a lid on it that is fitted specifically. Yeah, I can see the chat. Hi. I have a big mason jar with a lid fitted on it specifically for like an airlock. So you can get one of those, but it's not 100% necessary really to have one for sauerkraut. You just cut up your cabbage and add like 3 or 4 tablespoons of salt, and just work it all together with your hands, like get in there, mix it really good, and then let it sit for maybe about an hour or so and sweat. And then if it doesn't produce enough of its own brine to completely submerge it, then you can make a little bit of your own brine. Just mix a couple tablespoons of salt and some water and then add it to that. And then you'll just let it sit on the counter for about a week. And you can add other veggies to that if you want. Like, I like to add carrots or broccoli or cauliflower. Cauliflower is probably one of my favorites to add to it. Oh, and fire cider. Fire cider in sauerkraut is delicious. Fire cider is like you're gonna mix equal parts of like some really hot peppers, ginger, onion, a lot of garlic, any other kind of like medicinal herbs you want to add to it in a mason jar. Just fill it all the way up to the top, filled with equal parts of that stuff, and then top it off with some raw apple cider vinegar. It has to be raw or you won't get all the good benefits from it. And then let that sit on the counter for like a couple weeks. Then strain it out and store your fire cider in the fridge. And then you can use, if you have a dehydrator, you can take all your herbs and stuff out of the jar that you used and put them in your dehydrator and dehydrate them and grind them up and use them as seasonings and stuff. So that's pretty cool. What else? What else? What else? I had a whole list of cool stuff. Oh yeah, kombucha. Kombucha is like my all-time favorite fermented food. What I do, I usually do it about a gallon at a time. So I'll take a gallon of water, and I wouldn't use distilled water because it needs like the kombucha needs like the minerals and stuff from the water. So you can use tap water, but if you do use tap water, then make sure you bring the entire gallon to a rolling boil to get all the chlorine out, because chlorine will kill the cultures in the SCOBY. So I use that in about like 6 just regular sized tea bags. And make sure they're organic. I mean, they don't have to be organic. I've made it without organic tea before, and it works. I just prefer organic over non-organic. But yeah, 6 bags of tea and 1 cup of sugar per gallon. So if you're only making like maybe a quart at a time, just use a 1/4 cup of sugar and maybe like just 1 or 2 tea bags. But mix your sugar in and put your tea bags in your water, and then put it in your big gallon jar or whatever you're going to use. I use a continuous brew system, so I put like my tea in it and just let it sit overnight and put like a paper towel on the top, and it has a little spigot on the bottom, so I can just like fill up my bottles and set them in the fridge or set them on the counter wherever I want. Where else was I going with that? Where was I? Oh yeah, add the sugar, let it sit on the counter until it's cool, and that's when you're going to add your culture. So the SCOBY is like this big ugly mushroom thing, and they're usually maybe about like a 1/2 inch thick or so, and it just is like a circle that just sits on the top. It looks like a big mushroom, it just sits on the top of the tea. And you're going to add a cup of starter from a previous batch of tea, like a previous batch of kombucha, to raise the acidity so that it doesn't like grow mold or anything, because the acidity has to be high enough so that mold can't grow on it, or it definitely will, because I've made that mistake before. You can grow your own culture from a store-bought bottle of kombucha. Just make sure you buy like the unflavored kind without any additives or anything in it, and you can just pour it in a glass, a mason jar or something, and cover it with a paper towel and put a rubber band or something around it. You don't want to cover it with an airtight lid, because it could explode, and you don't want that to happen because it's fermenting, so it's producing like gases and stuff, and it could explode on the counter. Nobody wants that. But usually that takes maybe about 3 to 6 weeks to grow a culture, depending on how warm it is in your house. We usually keep it like about 70 in here, and it, you know, I just let mine ferment for about a week with the culture already in it, and it takes a little bit longer for the culture to grow itself. What else? What else? What else? What else? Oh, I made the best banana bread I have ever had in my whole life yesterday. It's so good. Laura's laughing at me in the kitchen. I Paula Deen the banana bread. I was like, okay, I'm just gonna eyeball it, and then if it's delicious, I'll just like write it down so we can make it again. And we had like 5 bananas in the freezer, so I was like, okay, we're using 5 bananas. And I added a cup of sugar, 3 cups of flour, 2 tablespoons of salt, 2 tablespoons of baking powder, 3 eggs, and 2 teaspoons of pie spice. And then I like mashed all the bananas up, add the wet ingredients first, and then add the dry ingredients into that. That made 2 loaves, so like 2 separate bread pans. And I put it on 350 for about 50 minutes, so like 40 to 60 minutes it should take. And I also added cranberries and chocolate chips. Oh, and a whole stick of butter. I forgot to write that down in here. I put a whole stick of butter in it. It's delicious. Yeah, but I think that's going to be it for now. And I'm going to hop off here because my husband is downstairs with the kids. And my lovely best friend Laura is watching the baby. So I'm going to go relieve her so she can finish cleaning the kitchen. Bye, guys.